So I'm now at my stovetop and I have my favorite deep-sided stir-fry type pan. And I'm going to just turn the burner on underneath it. Normally you would add a little bit of oil at this point, but we don't want this dish to get too greasy. So I'm not adding any oil. I'm just letting the pan preheat here a little bit. And I've got 2 packages or 2 pounds of pork. I'd like it to fall out of the packaging a little bit more naturally than it is. Just shaking it out here. All right, I'm just going to pull. And be prepared for a big sizzle as this hits the pan. There we go. That's 1 pound. I've got my second package here. There we go. And I'm going to turn this down really low now. I got our pan nice and hot. The meat's initially in there. And I'm just going to break it up with a wooden spoon really quickly. I just want to make sure that it kind of comes apart and doesn't stay in big lumps in the pan. Got my spoon rest here. I'm going to move it down to the lower burner so it doesn't reach over top. Okay, so leave this for a bit and I'm going to come back with some seasonings for you. Get some pepper in there. And again, I'm going to oops, I had the wooden spoon in the pan. That's not a good thing. I'm just now going to mix all this into our meat. There we go. As our meat melts a bit, you noticed I added only Worcestershire sauce. I didn't add very much, but there's a lot of liquid in this pan now, as the meat is expressing its juices. So the meat to the spoon is really soft. It's like pushing through mud right now. And I've now put my heat at approximately medium. And we're going to get this meat cooking up nicely with all of its seasonings mixing in. And I'm pushing down with my spoon for the blind audience and dragging to the middle of the pan. Pushing down and dragging to the middle of the pan and then chopping kind of a little bit in the middle where the pile is forming. There we go. So you'll hear that. That's really a sizzle at this point. And again, I've got the tip of the spoon and I'm chopping into the meat because it's still kind of sticking to itself in big clumps and it's not very ground up right now. All right, knock off the spoon a little bit there and I'll get our last ingredient for our filling. All right, so here I have my vegetable portion of our pie. We have an onion that has been peeled and halved, and I just have half of it, and I have a shallot. I'm going to just cut the ends of this shallot off and quickly peel that and just discard the peels. And you can hear the meat cooking in the background there, I hope. It's just sizzling away for us. It was an odd shaped shallot, large, but very odd shape. So, aha, it was actually 2 little lobes of a shallot. I'm going to just cut that tip off of that one, throw it aside, cut the tip off of this one, throw it aside. We're just going to quickly slice this. Just thin little slices. There we go. We're going to slice this piece here. We ended up with probably 1/4 cup of shallot. And we have half a medium onion. All right, the shallot's all sliced up there. Let's stir our meat again. Oh, very nice. Now I can start smelling the Worcestershire sauce. There we go. The meat is starting to get some pieces in there that feel a little harder, but not all of it. Quickly, I'm going to slice our onion now. And what I'm doing is I got half of the onion, I got the cut side down, and I'm just cutting thin slices across that, and then I'm gonna go twist it and just cut across those slices to make tiny pieces of onion, because you don't wanna have people finding big chunks of onion in your dish when it comes to a meat pie. All right, so all those vegetables are diced up there now. All right, so now I'm going to take the cutting board and I'm going to just push all these vegetables into our meat. Except for this piece that did not get cut very well, I'm going to recut it. There we go. Okay. All right, so we're done with our cutting board and our onions and shallots now. I'm going to mix those into our meat. Turn our heat down a bit because it's cooking quite nicely here. And now we're going to take some potato, and I've just got a box cheese grater. I bought this at what's the name of the Swedish furniture place? IKEA. And it's just a little plastic bowl with a cheese grater on top, and I'm just running the potato over that to shred the potato. That's all we really want, is to shred it. And it's sticking a little bit, but that's okay. All we're looking for is potato shreds. There we go. Let's take a look inside here. Yes, see, we're getting a nice kind of potato puree. This would be a good way to make hash browns if you wanted to make hash browns. And this is the thickener for our dish. All right, so my potatoes are starting to fall off the top here. I'm just gonna start wiping these off into the pan. I could have actually held the cheese grater right over the frying pan, and I think that's what I'm going to do from now on. But I wanted to kind of get a measure of how much potato we ended up with. Okay, so I shook it off into the pan there. I'm going to move back over to the counter to get more leverage. And I have decided, okay, so one potato got us half a container. I think I'm just going to go right into the pan from now on with all of it, because it's just causing a mess. All right, so I've got my cheese grater here, and I'm just going to hold the grater part, not the bowl, and I'm just going to go over the frying pan. And we have a large chunk of potato in the pan, but that's okay. This is the nubbin I'm not able to grate. Let me put another. And now I'm just holding the grater horizontal to the frying pan, or perpendicular to the frying pan, and just grating right into it. And the potato goo is falling right on top here. And I think we've got enough potato with 1.5 here. It's kind of covering the entire surface of the pork here, and we don't want more potato than we want pork. This is a pork pie, not a potato pie. And I'm just going to stir this dish up now until it's all evenly mixed. Turn the heat up a bit. And I'm just going to make sure everything is well mixed in. There we go. All right, so this pie is going to cook. So we don't need to cook this stuff too much. So I'm going to turn the burner off now, and we're going to go fix our crusts. All right, so here we have our dough. Now this is not sat long enough in the fridge. Again, it's best overnight, but I really want pie for dinner tonight. And the difference between this dough and a pie crust dough is that this one is not rolled with a rolling pin. It is just molded. So I'm gonna get kind of a sense of how big it is here, and I'm gonna take a little over half of it. And there we go. And that's going to be our bottom. All right, so here we have our dough. I've got half of it, and now I'm just molding it by hand, and I'm just kind of pressing it out. You would, with the pie crust dough, you would roll it with a rolling pin. With this one, you're not going to roll it with a rolling pin. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to put it in the pan, and you're going to press it with your hands to the edges, making sure that your bottom is thin, but not poking holes in it. So I'm just taking my fist and kind of going around the edges and just pushing in, pushing in, pushing in. And depending on how much you like crust, you can leave these edges pretty thick, because this is meant to be a pie you can hold in your hand if this wasn't one that was a 9-inch pan like this, because of course nobody's going to hold a slice of pie in their hand. If you were doing a smaller kind of personal sized pie, that's the one you would leave the edges a little thicker so that you could hold them in your hand. So I'm literally just pushing out to the edges like that. There we go. And we want it fairly thin, this one, because I'm not going to hold this in my hand, and crust isn't my favorite part of the pie. It's the means of transporting the pie. And again, remember there was a lot of fat in this, so you'll note I did not put anything on the pan, and you don't need to, because the amount of fat in the crust, it's not going to stick. So I'm just going around the bottom edge and making sure that there's no extra thick sections, kind of spinning the pan and pushing down with my thumb on the edges. And then pulling out, pulling out, pulling out, pulling out. There we go, that side's nice and thick there. We're gonna thin that out a bit. And that's what makes this more of a standing paste than a pie crust. I wanna make sure it's kind of flat. All right. Starting to look like a pie, everybody, or at least the shell of a pie. I like this method much better than rolling pie crust, because pie crust always tears on me at the most inappropriate time. Although, if everyone asks, I can show a video with a trick I've learned to do that. That's if anybody asks. All right, so there we go. Now, for the blind viewers, we have a bunch of crust over the edge of the pie. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just grab a little paring knife and cut all that away. So I'm just coming up under the edge of the pan and going along the bottom lip of the pan and trimming my excess dough. Just literally taking my sharp paring knife underneath the edge of the pan and cutting away all the dough that's over the edge here. I'm leaving a little, like maybe a millimeter or so over the edge. That's okay, because it needs to have a seal somehow. All right, so I'm gonna roll this all up. And my estimation of how much this dough is gonna make is completely wrong, because it looks like we have enough for our lid here, and I thought we weren't going to have enough for the lid. So I'm just flattening it out now, and I'm going to use a second pie pan to measure how much we need for our lid. And again, I'm just using my forearm now and my hands, and I'm spreading it, patting it down, trying to keep the round shape as much as possible. Okay, how are we doing? Needs a little more here. So I start at the middle, push down, trying to thin it, and then work on the edges, flatten it out, make sure it doesn't stick to the board. There we go. Okay, let's see how we're doing here. A little more. We want it to be slightly larger than the pie pan. So for the blind audience, I'm taking the empty pie pan and putting it upside down over top of the round of dough that I'm creating here, and seeing if the dough sticks out at all. It's kind of fatter at one edge here. All right, let's see here. Oh, we've got some parts of the crust sticking out, but not everywhere. So, and this really is a Play-Doh-y type texture. It's quite almost a rubbery texture. It feels lovely on my hands, actually. A little greasy. And it's just wonderful. All right, let's check that now. Not quite. See everybody around the edges there? We need to get a little more on all the sides here. So I'm just gonna kind of just take where it's fatter and so I'm just gonna kind of push out here. There we go. Check it, make sure it's not sticking to the board again. I just pick it up, flip it over, put our pie pan on top, and I can feel crust almost everywhere now sticking out. I'm just kind of moving some of the edges that have too much. Really, if If I had started with more dough, this would have been a lot easier. But of course, I didn't. Oh, and we're done. This is not a pie that needs pre-baking of the crust. So I'm just taking my spoon now and I'm just scooping the pie filling into our pie crust. To make sure we have it evenly in there. I'm just pressing down with my spoon. Using my hand a little bit. It's kind of hot, but I'm going to do it. Okay, now that the pan's almost empty and a little lighter, I'm just going to tip it over the pie. Oh, and I hope I didn't get it all over my stove. I did get some all over my stove, but that's okay. I'll clean it up later. Just going to kind of push it into the middle there. Pushing down with my hands, knowing that that's very hot. Be very careful, everybody. Okay, we have a little bit of excess pie filling, but you can never make more to fill a pie at the last minute. So now I'm going to just make sure it's nice and solidly in there, so I'm pressing. Okay. All right. Okay, so now you'll see I'm back at my crust here, the top one that we made. I just took the pie crust, the pie pan off it. I'm going to get our pie here that's full of yummy, lummy meat. And we're just going to put this over top. Try and center it the best I can here. There we go. And there we go. All right. An onion sticking out of one side there. All right, so now I have all the edges covered here. And I'm just going to go around with a fork, pressing down, doing what they call crimping. And the crimping, hopefully, will make the edges of the pie seal, the top and bottom edges. All right, so I'm just going to finish crimping up the edges here, making sure that we have crimping all the way around the pie, which we do. And I'm just going to take my little paring knife here now and cut the excess. Okay, just spinning the pie and pushing the paring knife out from the edges. There we go. Use a bit more crimping right here. Just pushing down with a fork. There we go. All right. Oh, a little bit more cutting on the dough here. Now, as this dough has touched the pie, it's really not usable unless you have another meat pie you're making. So that's going to be wasted pie crust, but it's not that much pie crust. All right, so I'm going to take my fork now and I'm going to go poke holes in the top for steam to escape, because otherwise we've created a airtight bag that will explode. And this is now just going to go in my oven on a cookie sheet at 450 degrees until the crust is cooked, because remember, the interior is pretty well cooked already. I'm just going to put this inside of a broiler pan. And the reason I do that is in case juices come out, I don't want my oven being a mess. So here we go, inside the oven. Make sure it's kind of centered. And should have probably had it preheated, but oh well. About 450 degrees.